At 0200 hours on February 23, 2026, in the dangerous waters of the North Atlantic, alarms suddenly erupted aboard the Russian intelligence ship Yantar. Its electronic warfare suite was screaming, and the radar picture looked impossible. 12 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers appeared to have boxed the vessel in. Across the display, 152 American missile cells seemed ready to erase Yantar in seconds. And if you want to understand how the United States handles everything from warships and missiles to budgets and healthcare, you only have to watch how it applies systems like this. In America, whether the field is defense or medicine, there is usually a defined structure, a process, and a price attached to every step. That level of organization is part of the story here. Yantar was positioned in the middle of the GIUK Gap, the harsh maritime choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. Beneath its hull ran Atlantic Crossing 1. This was not just another undersea cable. It was one of the West's most critical arteries, carrying enormous volumes of financial traffic, secure diplomatic communications, and highly protected military data. If Russia had managed to attach a listening device to that fiber optic line, it could have created a direct window into highly sensitive Western communications. That is exactly what made the location so important. Officially, Moscow describes Project 22010 as an oceanographic research platform. In NATO language, that description is treated with deep skepticism. Yantar is widely regarded as a specialized surveillance vessel with the ability to interfere with undersea infrastructure. Operated by GUJI, Russia's highly secretive main directorate of deep-sea research, the ship carries a very specific and very capable asset: the AS-37 deep-diving submersible, a platform able to descend to 6,000 meters. Its titanium robotic arms are not there for coral samples. They are designed for tasks involving cables, sensors, and infrastructure resting on the ocean floor. The Russian commander likely believed the North Atlantic had handed him the perfect cover. Dense fog, near zero visibility, quiet engines, transponders silent. It probably seemed like the ideal moment to slip into position unnoticed. But that assumption missed the real nature of the battlefield. The Americans had layered the area with protection far beyond what was visible on the surface. One of those hidden tools was the Snakehead Large Diameter Unmanned Underwater Vehicle, or LDUUV, a modular, reconfigurable system built for long-endurance missions. Designed to move autonomously across the seabed, it can carry specialized payloads for intelligence work and subtle interference missions, making it an ideal unseen guardian for critical undersea routes like Atlantic Crossing 1. In a place like the GIUK Gap, visibility matters far less than acoustics. You do not need to see everything when you can hear everything. This region is one of the most intensely monitored underwater environments on Earth. The U.S. Navy's undersea surveillance network has turned the seabed into a listening grid so refined that distant movements can be detected, classified, and tracked with remarkable precision. By 0224 hours, confusion had taken over the bridge of the Yantar. The Russian captain, an experienced officer, understood immediately that the 12 destroyers on his radar could not all be real, but that did not make the situation any safer. If even one was genuine, then choosing wrong could be catastrophic. Russian naval doctrine offers a familiar response in this kind of situation: change radar frequencies and rely on passive sensors to separate genuine contacts from jamming. But what the Russians were facing was not ordinary electronic interference. The USS Donald Cook was reportedly using a more advanced method based on digital radio frequency memory, or DRFM, through its upgraded AN/SLQ 32V6 electronic warfare system. That distinction mattered. When Yantar's radar pulses went out into the fog, the American system could capture those exact electromagnetic signals, alter the timing and Doppler characteristics, and send them back almost instantly. Russian processors were built to filter noise and reject crude deception, but this was different. These false returns were not messy or obvious. They looked clean, consistent, and physically believable. To Yantar's combat system, every phantom contact appeared to have a real radar signature, a real speed, and a real heading. In effect, the ship was being flooded with flawless false reality. Pinned down on the surface by electronic deception and boxed in by weather, the Russian captain started looking for another angle. He noticed one important fact: the Americans had not used a direct strike. This was still a gray zone confrontation, so he made a risky calculation. If U.S. dominance ended at the surface, then perhaps the deep ocean still offered room to operate. He gave the order to launch the AS-37. At 0225 hours, the titanium submersible slipped beneath the freezing black water and began descending toward Atlantic Crossing 1. On the bridge, there may have been a sense of relief, even confidence. Whatever was happening above the waterline, the commander likely believed his most valuable tool would still be protected in the depths. That assumption did not last. the U.S. Navy was not only controlling the electromagnetic picture above, it was also positioned below. Waiting near the seabed was a snakehead LDUUV, hidden in the darkness and blended into the terrain. The Americans did not need a torpedo or some dramatic science fiction weapon. What followed was precise, controlled, and effective. As the AS-37 extended its robotic arms toward the fiber optic cable, the underwater drone moved into place and directed a high-intensity blue-green laser into the submersible's optical sensor array. Blue-green wavelengths travel through seawater far more effectively than most other light bands, making them especially useful in that environment. The result was immediate. The Russian cameras were overwhelmed and effectively blinded. At the same time, the snakehead delivered a localized acoustic jamming burst that severed the telemetry link between the submersible and its mothership. On Yantar's bridge, the live feed from the ocean floor dissolved into violent static. Telemetry indicators flashed red. In seconds, a multi-million-dollar deep-sea platform had been reduced to a drifting, unresponsive shell sinking into the mud. The mission was over before it had truly begun. The Russian captain knew this was no ordinary malfunction. It was a deliberate and highly controlled American ambush. Frustrated and looking for a way to regain initiative, he reportedly ordered the crew to prepare Yantar's anti-submarine warfare suite. The idea was to activate active sonar and signal that the ship could escalate if necessary. But before that step could be completed, the sea itself answered first. The Americans did not answer with a missile. They answered with sound. A maximum power mid-frequency active sonar pulse hit the Yantar's hull. It did not shatter equipment or injure the crew, but inside the ship it would have been deeply unsettling. A powerful metallic reverberation rolling through steel compartments, like a giant hammer striking an empty tank. Every sailor on board would have understood the meaning immediately. In naval signaling, a close active sonar ping can serve as a blunt psychological message. It says, "We know exactly where you are. We have a firing solution, and your survival at this moment depends entirely on our restraint." Now, the Russian captain faced a complete lockout. His deep-diving submersible was down and disabled. His radar picture was saturated with false contacts, and from below, an unseen threat had just announced its presence without ever showing itself. But the message was not finished. As the crew was still absorbing the sonar warning, passive sensors picked up a massive underwater contact. It was not a torpedo. It was the USS Delaware, a Virginia-class nuclear-powered attack submarine weighing roughly 7,800 tons. And it was not far away. It was executing a classic shadowing maneuver. Rather than surfacing or broadcasting a warning, Delaware moved silently beneath the freezing water and passed directly under Yantar's keel at a depth of only around 60 feet. For the Russian sonar operators, the image on the screen must have been chilling. An enormous nuclear-powered attack submarine gliding directly below them with absolute confidence. This was no navigational accident. It was a deliberate statement. A calm, controlled, fully lawful demonstration of presence. The message was unmistakable. We do not need to strike, because you are already contained. At that point, the Russian captain knew the operation was finished. No missile had been launched, no torpedo had been fired, and yet the entire mission had been dismantled from every direction. The order came to withdraw. Yantar turned back toward Murmansk, leaving behind a disabled submersible on the seabed and a badly damaged sense of control. For the United States, it was a complete success. The Atlantic Crossing 1 cable remained secure. Just as important, every radar emission, electronic signature, and acoustic profile produced by one of Russia's most specialized intelligence vessels had likely been recorded, analyzed, and added to Western databases. Yantar did not just fail in its mission. It may have handed over a detailed blueprint of its own behavior for future encounters. This is what makes the episode so much bigger than a dramatic maritime standoff. It was a strategic signal. In today's naval environment, control is no longer defined only by ship count or missile range. It is defined by information advantage. The side that owns the data picture usually shapes the outcome long before the public ever hears about it. Modern naval power is often less about dramatic action and more about invisible control. Entering an adversary's operating space without being detected, watching without being seen, and proving that even their most advanced systems can be mapped, monitored, and quietly neutralized. A submarine like USS Delaware does not need spectacle. Its strength lies in remaining hidden while understanding everything around it. What happened under those gray Atlantic swells was not just a tactical move. It was a form of pressure applied with extraordinary precision. The North Atlantic is no longer just cold water and shipping routes. It is a layered strategic environment filled with undersea cables, acoustic sensors, satellite-linked systems, autonomous vehicles, and stealth submarines moving beneath global commerce. Anyone entering that environment without full awareness is operating half-blind. The incident also highlights a deeper shift in naval doctrine. Fleets today are not just fleets. They are floating data hubs, connected nodes inside a much larger network. Success does not always arrive in a dramatic flash. Sometimes it appears in the quiet confidence of a commander who already knows the other side is fully exposed. So maybe the real question is not whether Yantar was outplayed. The real question is how many similar encounters never become public. How many silent contests are unfolding beneath the Atlantic every week, far from headlines and cameras. Was this a warning without smoke? A reminder that undersea superiority remains one of America's quietest strengths. What makes the episode even more significant is the imbalance in perception. From the outside, it could be dismissed as routine shadowing, another tense meeting between rival powers in cold water. But below that simple surface story was a contest driven by algorithms, acoustic signatures, signal fusion, and decision cycles measured in milliseconds. The side that processes faster, correlates more accurately, and anticipates earlier gains control of the entire environment. In that sense, dominance today is not just physical, it is cognitive.